Call the meeting to order. Please rise and join us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you for coming. Call the roll.
Trustee Sperling. Here. Trustee Lee. Trustee Hines. Yay. Trustee Youngerman.
Yay.
Trustee Marisak.
Yes.
And Trustee Bond.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, we do have a quorum this evening. Would either Shar or Judy like to speak under public comment? This is the public comment period. Hearing nobody, I'll go ahead and move on. Items for discussion, we have the FY18 budget review. Justin.
Thank you, President Brawley. In front of the board tonight is the general fund budget for fiscal year 18 starting May 1st.
Justin, is your mic on? Excuse me. I can barely hear you.
It was. Now it is.
Better. Thank you.
Yep.
Let's turn them off again.
First thing we'll talk about is the current year that we're in and how we're faring so far. Fiscal year 17 budget revenue was $9.8 million, expenditures was $9.7 for a surplus of approximately $90,000. We are coming in not quite $100,000 more on revenue and expenditures, and the surplus is coming in at about the same as it was budgeted. The revenues, the sales tax is coming in higher than budgeted for the revenues, which makes up that part. And then the departments have done a good job containing limiting the expenditures that they've had this year to maintain the surplus at what was budgeted. Moving into fiscal year 18, the overview of the general fund budget. Departments requested $10.3 million in revenue and $10.4 million in expenses for a deficit of approximately $150,000. The recommended budget presented to the board tonight is revenue of $10.28 million and expense of $10.26 million for a surplus of approximately $22,000. We'll talk momentarily about the contributing factors to these increases in fiscal year 18 from fiscal year 17. 3 equals 80. What that means is the top 3 revenue sources make up over 80% of the village's general fund revenues. We'll go through each of those individually. The first one, the highest general fund revenue, is sales tax at $4.1 million. This is an estimated 5% increase over the current year, as well as a full year of stores that have opened in the last year. The next is property taxes at $2.2 million. This includes a tax levy freeze on existing property and an increase based on new property only as directed by the board. This represents an increase of approximately $21,000 above the 2015 levy extension. And if you look at the EAV as shown in the table, it increased by approximately 3% over 2014. And also, if you look at the table, this is actually the first increase that we've seen in the EAV since levy year 2009. The third item and the third largest revenue source in the general fund is income tax. We use the IML estimate that comes out typically every 3 to 4 months. This year, they're projecting about $101 per capita, equates to approximately $1.8 million. And this is a small increase of about $4 over fiscal year 2017, and that amounts to about $70,000 total. Two departments requested additional staff this year. The first was police. They requested 4 new patrol officers, and there have been 2 new officers included in the budget. And then the second was Public Works with 4 summer seasonal employees.
May I ask, President Brawley, would you like us to hold questions until Justin is done with his presentation? Sure.
Another item that we always look at with the general fund budget is the health insurance. These are historical percentages on the increases. So on health insurance, we budgeted approximately 15% premium increase at renewal. This totals approximately $71,000. This is about $15,000 increase for the employees as a whole, and then $56,000 increase to the village. Some general items in the general fund budget. These are some of the larger items in the budget. The village saw a decrease in IMRF for fiscal year 18 to $197,000. That was based upon the actuarial study done by IMRF for the village of Montgomery. Liability insurance is budgeted to go up approximately $9,000 to $304,000 in fiscal year 18. Rebate agreements with several businesses will continue and includes a decrease of approximately $70,000 to $915,000. Dispatch services will increase by approximately $6,000 to $265,000. The police pension contribution continues to increase this year by $63,000 to $583,000. The total of the tree program is $105,000 in fiscal year 18 and includes 300 tree replacements. Although not included on the slide, we were also able to include Kendall Area Transit and the community survey in the budget. At this time, I'll turn it back over to the board for any questions.
Thank you, sir. Teresa?
Okay, start of my broken record every year. I met with the chief. We talked about increasing patrol officers, and we came to a conclusion to ask for 4 officers. In our 2x2, I was told we do not have the money to hire 4 officers. We have enough to hire 2. I'd like to see us try to get more officers. We seem to be a little behind on growing the department, and in comparison to some of the numbers that come from, for example, the FBI, or I believe there was an average of Midwest
Correct.
towns of similar size to us.
Correct. 2.3 to anywhere from 2.3 to 2.7 per 1,000.
Per 1,000 people in the village. And if Chief Myers could maybe add a little bit of where the need is to add 4 officers, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. Thank you. Recently, when looking during our discussions with the village administrator and the finance director, we saw an increase in calls for service. In December of 15 to December 16, that month alone, we had over 500 calls plus difference. Now, I know the weather had a lot to do with that. If you recall, December of 15, we hardly had any snow. This past December 16, we were hit with 3 good-sized snowstorms, which increases a lot of calls for service for the police department. So I'm sure that's one area where the calls increased. Again, Trustee Sperling mentioned the per capita. I know there were some tough years here back in 08, 09, 2010. So we're trying to get caught up for that. And then the investigations, we are moving 1 officer into investigations, so we'll have 3 in there. Our investigations division has been really busy and active here this last 6 to 12 months. So With that, there's some growth. There's a need for officers on the street.
And we are a little bit lower than we typically have been when we reach, usually when we get to December, we may have had somebody that has resigned and gone someplace else. So we typically have a little bit of a loss when it comes to December. And when we met as of December, we were down even lower than we typically are. And that's why this is really important to me, and that's why I keep pushing that we need to hire more officers. So.
If I have a question, if we hire more officers, because right now budget says 2, you're requesting 4. If we go to 4, does that mean are we redistricting? Are we having another officer on the street in addition to the officers in the districts that we already have? Are we doing? Do we have? Would it be a designated traffic officer, or what would it be?
Well, unfortunately, one of our truck officers just resigned Friday, so we would move for sure investigations, one in there. The plan was to get truck enforcement by the spring going, which we think is still possible. And if we do increase, I'm not sure we would change the districts the way we have them set. 1B is considered west of Orchard, 30 west of Orchard, so we would add a second car to 1B. But I don't believe we would change anything east of Orchard the way it's set right now.
Chief, do you recall over the last, let's say, 4 years? I know that we've added officers, I believe, every year over the last 4 years. Do you recall, or Justin, how many we've added?
Sure, let me just do a little math here.
If I recall correctly, my first 2 years going through the budget cycle, we did not add any. Last year we added 3, and then this year, as the budget is presented, we have 2.
Yeah, that is correct. You have seen, like Officer Rizzo went to Aurora, so you saw her replacement. Sergeant Sullivan retired, so you saw his replacement. So not actually increase in numbers till recently.
So we're seeing as a board, officers come through being sworn in, but really we're just replacing people that have left or retired, or
Correct.
Really not adding any bodies to the street.
You know, that's the tough conversation that we have every time, every budget cycle, you know, with what's going on in the world in general, and in our area. It's something that I think the board is very supportive to increase the number of officers. I think at the same time we have to be cognizant of how much we can afford. So I'm open to what the board has to say. What we can do is at a future meeting, maybe in March, we can take a look at that stuff a little bit more closely as to our staffing levels and where they are, where they've been, call volumes. You know, take a second look at that, if that's what you guys want to do.
In the meantime, if staff doesn't already know this, can you get us the estimated cost of an officer?
What is our number right now, officers? What's our total?
28.
28?
Well, minus the
Oh.
one that resigned, 27 full-time.
Chief, deputy chief, and sergeants also
Mm-hmm.
included in that number.
Or in that number?
Yes. 28 is all sworn officers.
Okay.
There are part-time officers in addition to those 28 officers.
How many part-time officers do we have?
We currently have 4, allotted at 6.
Now, do we use those part-time officers regularly so that we're at 31? For, you know,
You mean if for considered like FTE, full-time employment? I would have to work with Justin on that. They do. I have the payroll here, and they're only allowed by Obamacare right now 29 hours a week.
all right. So
We
our
try not
floor
to
is
go over
maybe
that.
3.
Correct.
4 equals 3, maybe? Okay, so we're at like 30. That number, that 2.3 number per thousand, how many of our surrounding areas are at a number like that? I mean, is that a pie-in-the-sky number, or is it a real number? Do Oswego, Plainfield, Yorkville, Aurora, are they hitting that number, or is it everybody's down from that number?
Yeah, I believe that that's wishful thinking. But I would say that on the low end, the 2.3, I know Oswego matches that. Their population is, I believe, 25 or 26,000, and they're above 50 officers sworn. I don't know what the per capita is for Aurora. I'd have to check.
A lot.
Yeah.
I would add from our meeting too, I have a note that the Midwest average is 2.0 per capita.
Okay.
So if that helps you.
My question on that data, and we can get into this at that future meeting in March,
Sure.
is that data, X town in the country where they're maybe the only police force they have is the county. And so here we're in a different situation where if there's a call locally, that's our officers that are going there. But if there's a situation, we certainly have Kane County Sheriff's Office, Kendall County Sheriff's Office that can assist with situations. So we have, I guess, local assets that can also come in, when we need to. So let's look at that in March.
Also, Justin and I have spoken, and Jeff really cracking down on the numbers because it is expensive, and I totally understand that. We would support a stagger hire, not necessarily for total cost per officer per budget. That would be that's hundreds of thousands of dollars. But stagger, 4, 8, 12-month hire, 10-month hire would help.
Right, and the chief and I had talked about that as well. We wouldn't be putting all 4 in at the same time. And I believe, Trustee Youngerman, were you the one that just asked the cost for hiring? I have a note from our budget meeting, and again, not to put Justin on the spot, just my note was $78,000 to $79,000 to do a new hire.
The $70,000 to $79,000 does not include the police pension contribution. It is roughly $100,000 per officer.
Thank you.
Per year.
Per year.
For a full year. So if they're
For a full
hired
year, yes.
for a full year.
Yeah, but I'm thinking long term, to hire 4 officers, that's $400,000 a year.
We do stagger them. The year we hire them, we do stagger them just for the academy and for training once they get out of the academy here. But is the concern is we stagger them this year, but next year we have the full load of however many we hire. So if it's, if you stagger it so it's only $200,000 this year, it's still $400,000 the following year. So
A lot.
It is a lot. Thank you for letting me express my concern.
I had another question, but I can't remember what it is, so if I think of it later, I'll ask.
One thing I wanted to note or point out to the board is the LGDF that we have, the income tax from the state, $1.8 million that we expect for revenue this year. That's something that we fight for almost every day down in Springfield, especially when we go down there. We'll be down there in a couple of weeks to advocate for that again. One of the draft budgets that the Illinois Policy Institute sent out a couple weeks ago included no tax increase for the state, but it included swiping all of this from every town. So just so you're aware there, in my opinion, a real possibility that this is impacted to some extent over the next several years. So every year we advocate for that. So any other questions on the general fund? Okay. Moving on, we have the Clay Street building. Todd?
Thank you, Mr. President. The facility at 331 Clay Street has a peppered history, from what I understand. This site was once home to the village's deep well number 2, the village's first water tower. Additionally, I'm told that it is previously served as the fire station prior to their new location. Furthermore, the site was home to ESDA, a local emergency services group. Most recently, is that my microphone? I'm sorry, it's
No.
distracting. Most recently, the facility has been controlled by Public Works, acting as a supplemental storage space for equipment and supplies. At your stations in front of you tonight, you'll see several recent pictures of the facility. There are some issues consistent with an aging facility, for example, deteriorating roof and coping, which is the concrete edge around the top of the roof wall there. The facility needs some tuck pointing. It's got some rotting fascia that needs to be addressed. There's a leaking roof, if I hadn't already mentioned that. These are things that certainly can be repaired. However, the cost to do so currently isn't ranking among a priority amongst village responsibilities. One estimate for rehabilitation work was in excess of $60,000. All potential demolition of the facility could cost between $40,000 and $50,000. We've also considered possibly selling or auctioning the facility. However, its current design doesn't really fit within the code requirements, or not the code requirements, the zoning requirements for that neighborhood. So that's something that would have to be considered. So as part of my due diligence in determining how best to proceed with this facility, I've spoken with the Montgomery Countryside Fire District, which you know is located right across the street. They're very interested in taking over the facility once again and assuming responsibility for it going forward. They suggested they would use it as storage, potentially for training exercises, and perhaps even sponsor a new organization such as a CERT team or Citizens Emergency Response Team. With their continued interest in the facility, I'm recommending permission to move forward with the recommendation for a legal transfer of the facility over to the fire district. Again, that needs to be drafted. The specifics of that need to be worked out, but I'm looking for some support at this time to move forward with that, as it seems to be the least costly option for the village while providing a building block for continued community involvement and customer service at that location. I'm happy to entertain any questions you may have at this time. Otherwise, I'd be looking for support to finalize some of the details of that agreement.
Todd, would you please repeat the numbers that you
Repeat the numbers.
repeat the
I'm sorry,
the microphone? I have about 60 grand is what I wrote down, and then
So one recent estimate for rehabilitation was in excess of $60,000. That would just be to get it back to a safe and operable facility that we can continue to use as a storage facility. Demolition would range probably between $40,000 and $50,000. There is the potential that it could be repurposed and sold or auctioned, which would be at an earning to the village. I don't know if there's any interest in the facility or if it could be rezoned appropriately. Even with demolition, the village would then continue to have to maintain the lot.
right.
So with a transfer, we would kind of waive all responsibility going forward and pass it on to somebody else.
Okay, thank you.
Rich, I don't mean to put you on the spot on this. What's the viability of that site? Because I know the fire district is interested, and that's actually seems to make a lot of sense in my mind. But what is the viability for that site as some sort of a commercial use? It's probably not zoned for that currently.
It is not zoned for that currently in the land use plan. It would be designated, I believe, as single-family residential. If it was to be a commercial zone, it would be categorized as a spot zone, which is not the greatest way to set up our zoning ordinance. So I wouldn't think that it would have great potential as a commercial site. We have a number of other properties within the Mill District or the downtown that would be more appropriate for commercial use than that one would be.
And to me, it seems like it would be the least obtrusive change of ownership to the neighbors. You know, if it went from that to commercial, you would have increased traffic and parking and whatnot in a neighborhood setting. If the fire district is using it, it's very similar to what they're seeing now. You know,
Correct.
And is it my understanding that didn't the village come to this property through a similar agreement from the fire district?
This predates me by a number of years, so I'm not exactly sure that I have the full story on it, but I believe, yes, at some point it was deeded to the village by the fire district. Or there'd be some additional costs if it were to be a commercial site through rezoning. You know, obviously the facility has a water and sewer line, but there's not like a working bathroom in the facility, so that's something that would have to be considered. It would probably deter some interest. There's also, while there's driveway space leading up to those garages, there's no parking or true business set up there.
I would just add, I was in there before the fest last year. It's pretty gross in there and creepy. I couldn't get out of there fast enough. So
I'm glad it's not just me.
Are gross and creepy technical terms?
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right. I'm not really hearing opposition to that. So we'll proceed in that manner. Oh, we haven't gotten to do this in a long time. Department updates, Jeff.
Do they have anything that might benefit us? As long as we're putting something on the table.
Saving us $60,000.
I would agree with Administrator Zofel. Certainly they have things that would be of interest to us, but nothing that they've offered to exchange.
Could we swap it for the building in front of Public Works?
Oh, that would be fantastic, but again, nothing that they've offered to exchange. I don't think they'd entertain that because they enjoy having a facility on both sides of the railroad tracks.
So much for the poker face then.
All right, department updates.
Thank you very much. Today I met with Sergeant Palco. She has completed her 4th week at Northwestern Staff and Command. She currently holds a 95-plus grade average, and she's working on her project as we speak. Her graduation date is in May, and I will send that to you in the notes very soon. That's all I have.
We've enjoyed a fairly mild winter, with the exception of December. I'm not convinced that it's over, but we have seen some reduced expenditures as far as overtime, equipment maintenance, salt usage. We do have to continue to store the salt. I don't think we'll have any issue with that, thankfully. We're trying to fill a vacancy in the mechanic role currently, and that's about where we stand.
I have a question, if I may. Are we in a situation like we were last year where we were required to purchase a certain tonnage?
Well, through the state CMS program, we have to bid on salt in April prior to the season in which you plan to take it. So there's really too much time for a true, accurate forecast. Given our surplus in salt from last season, I only bid on 860 tons. I also selected the 80-120 option, which allows us to take a minimum of 80% of what I bid or a maximum of 120. So we have to take, if my calculations are right, 688 tons. We've already taken 400 tons. We have another 200 on order that should be coming next Monday, and I think we'll easily be able to stockpile that. There's another 88 tons there that if we don't throw this season, I'll probably have to jam in, but I think we can do that. So to answer your question, yes, I'm required to take the minimum of what I bid on, but our salt prices per ton are very reasonable. So I'm inclined to take as much as I can reasonably store because I anticipate they may go down a little bit next year, but at some point they're bound to go back up.
Okay. No, I wasn't sure if we were in the same predicament that we were last year, so thank you.
How much salt do you think you can jam in the Clay Street building? Thanks for not answering.
There's a number of reasons we don't want to do that.
Thank you. My staff has been working very hard on the property tax rebates. They are ahead of where they were last year at this time in processing those. Already have some into the payable system, and most of them have already been gone through to determine if they are eligible or not, although they do have a few left to determine that. Other than that, we've been working on the budget for quite some time, as you all know. So that's it.
When you go to mail the checks, you should start with M. Just saying. You know, everyone starts with A, or start with M. Start in the middle.
Pick it up.
We'll consider that.
Follow that, Rich.
It's tough to follow. Staff is working with the Plan Commission on some amendments to our parking regulations. We talked with them last week about our ideas on some adjustments to the parking section of the zoning ordinance. So that's going well. We'll continue to work with them on that as we also process a few cases that we know will come forward to the commission in March and April, and then obviously on to the board for some development ideas. I referenced, or Jeff referenced in the weekly notes, item that I had asked for some village board input on a possible apartment development, so I look forward to your response to that. Many of you have already talked to me about it. We have, for those of you that don't know, we have International Building Code is our base code for the village. Every 3 years, the IBC updates their national base building code. Currently, we are following the 2009 edition. There has been 2 subsequent editions of this code. My experience is that most communities don't update it every 3 years. They look at maybe a 6 or a 9 year cycle, but we're definitely in the middle of that now based on the fact that we're on 2009. So Mike is trying to find the time to review. It's a quite lengthy document, as you can imagine, and requires some input from some of our consultants, such as our plumbing consultant and structural engineers in some cases. So anyway, we're looking at finding the time to do that and either update to the 2012 or the 2015 edition of that code. This overlaps a little bit into our discussion about the apartment complex and the elevator discussion that I put in the notes last week. Building department's also working on finalizing COs, certificate of occupancies, for both United Sugars and Nexio. They've been on temp COs as they're building out the interiors of those buildings. They look like they're finished from the outside, but the inside is still a work in progress. United Sugars is very close, but they're not completely operational at this point. And Nexio is the same way. They're working on getting some of their silos operational, and they have a limited amount of ability to do their process there, but they need more with their final product. So, and then I think in the next year we'll be looking at the potential of some large annexations. So we've had some meetings with property owners, and so I think we have that to look forward to, along with some smaller commercial development activity.
Awesome. So we haven't done a department update in almost a year, and that's all we had. Just kidding.
Wow.
Thanks for doing that. We don't have executive session.
I could go longer if you'd like.
No, that's perfect. And I know both these guys
Jeff
have
would
any
not be
too,
happy
so
with me, but yeah.
that's just quite all right. We do not have executive session today, so with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So
Wait.
moved.
Oh, new or unfinished? I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's been moved. Is there a second? Then we'll do discussion.
Second.
All right, discussion.
I did have one new
Sorry.
item for you.
I skipped right over that.
You
Not on
did.
purpose.
And I finally had. I know, you look so disappointed. Thursday evening, Rotary is hosting 2 young ladies to do a presentation. They are here as exchange students. One is from France and one is from Switzerland. They will be talking about their home countries as well as their experiences here in America. And the public is welcome. We will be starting at 6:30 Thursday evening in this room. Thank you.
All right. Anything else? All right, there's been a motion and a second to adjourn. Call the roll.
Okay. Trustee Heinz?
Yay.
Trustee Youngerman?
Yay.
Trustee Marisak,
Yes.
Trustee Bond,
Yes.
and Trustee Spurling.
Yes.
And we're adjourned. Thank you.